screaming, yelling, and banging a podium, he lost me at hello. That's it. I'm gone. Done. And I pray and I hope every day that there are more and more people out there like me that are actually looking at this, because it's the only thing that's going to affect change. It's not going to matter. We could say it. We don't like Jews, or we don't like black people, or we don't like Italians, or whatever. But at the end of the day, the root cause of it is exactly those kind of people, the people that we're electing as leaders, the people that are, as that man pointed out before, land grabbing. Those are the people that we've elected as leaders. And if we don't change and we don't get rid of them, then I agree with you. This is never going to change.
You're right. There has to be a meeting of the minds. There has to be a middle ground. There has to be some place where people can agree. And as long as we have people who have a personal agenda, and you have people who identify with that agenda, okay, you're never going to have the peace that you're looking for. If I can, you go back to the Bible where it says God promising the promised land to the Jews, the Hebrews. Look, there are a lot of things in the Old Testament. I mean, when Moses is not allowed to enter into the promised land, and Moses anoints Joshua as the leader, God indirectly speaks to Joshua by telling him, when you enter the land of Canaan, I want you to slaughter every man and woman and child. Okay, I want you to destroy all of their belongings. Don't take anything. I hear things like that, and I say to myself, is that the God that I would want to pray to?
Or was that someone's interpretation of it?
No, I think, basically, the Old Testament, the 5 books of Moses were supposedly written by God. Whereas, the New Testament, as you are well aware, was basically written secondhand by, even though it says Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, most of the disciples were long gone when those books were being transcribed and put into the modern New Testament. So you couldn't really go and ask questions. It was a matter of interpretation. That's why there are so many interpretations within the New Testament. But the Old Testament was accepted as the Word of God.
And there's another phrase in the Bible where God supposedly says, "And the meek shall inherit the earth." So, who are going to be the meek that inherit the earth? And all these people that are boisterous and loud, do they not realize that they're going to lose in the end as well?
Well, you see, I in fact, when we had this discussion about, Old New Testament, whatever, on one hand, and I remember I brought this up to a professor, when I took the Bible as literature, and I said, in the Old Testament, God is supposed to be loving and caring, but there's more fighting and killing and death, all in the name of God. And then you turn around and you read the New Testament, or portions of the New Testament, and Jesus is talking about love and peace. So you say to yourself, and I hope I'm not struck by a bolt of lightning, but it's almost like God is talking through both sides of his mouth. In the Old Testament, there's a lot of war and killing and death, and in the New Testament, it's love and peace.
Well, you said the Old Testament was written by God. In what language?
Well, according to Michelle Bachman, the Bible was written
in English.
In English,
I don't think she said.
But
I really
actually,
don't
she
think
was
she said
referring
that.
to the New Testament, and even the New Testament was not written. English did not even exist. You know, it was written
wasn't
in
it Arabic and then Latin?
It was written in Aramaic and in Greek,
Aramaic.
and then it was translated.
Sorry,
And the only place where it might have, been, as the movie says, lost in translation, would be just that, when you're going from one language to another. Okay,
Yep.
it's up to the scribe who's writing it to interpret it in whichever way he sees fit. Now, granted, many of the scribes were also very religious people. They weren't just people they weren't like secretaries, taking dictation. They were learned people, and they were transcribing what they read, and sometimes they had to put in their own opinions, which was it was educated, an educated opinion.
I'll go back to it. In what language is the original, the Old Testament written in?
I told you, Aramaic.
The Old Testament?
The Old
Yeah,
Testament was
Aramaic.
written in Aramaic.
And who translated it? The Old Testament I'm talking about.
Whoever the scribes were.
So you said it's the words of God, but once it's translated, it's not words of God
No, if
anymore.
it was translated to Hebrew. The Old Testament was translated into Hebrew.
That's what I was talking about, the old one. Yeah, I said the Old Testament.
But it wasn't written in
And
Hebrew.
then when did it
It was
actually
written
get
in
translated
Aramaic.
to English?
I know, but
I bet you that's where it
who
really got
translated
messed up.
it? Whoever translated it had to also put in their own opinions. So it's no longer words of God. Follow what I'm saying?
I agree. And it's if people that believe in the Bible truly believe in the Bible and truly believe that, as I led to before, the meek shall inherit the earth, then that indicates that all of these people that are out there running around creating havoc and causing terror and bigotry and everything else that's going on, those people are doomed for hell anyway. So they might as well just give it up now.
Well, I have a feeling that hell may be a lot more crowded than we tend to believe.
Yep. Exactly.
But I do want to say that a couple of things that I remember. I don't know if you're familiar with the movie School Ties with Brendan Fraser.
No.
The movie came out in the late 80s, maybe even in the early 90s. It was about a typical kid from Scranton. Okay, senior year, gets a scholarship to a very exclusive prep school, and his father works in the coal mines. He's a supervisor, and the kid is tough. All right, he had to be. He was Jewish, and he learned to defend himself. Growing up in a town where there were very few Jews. And he gets a chance to go to this prep school, which is almost like an entranceway into Harvard, which is where he wants to go. And he's an A student, don't get me wrong. In high public education, he's an A student, and he's going to be the star quarterback. And needless to say, the guy who thought he was going to be the star quarterback is very much upset by this, but he's willing to accept his role if it helps the team up to a point. And the coach says to him, well, do you have any dietary requests? Obviously, he was alluding to kosher food. And the kid basically says no. He says, I don't like turnips, which was supposed to be a joke line. I don't. And the coach says, well, I don't either. So he says, why? Well, he says, these kids are very privileged, and don't tell them any more than you want them to know. And his first night there, he's made friends with a bunch of people from the football team, and one or two of the guys pass anti-Semitic remarks about how did the guy get his stereo system. He said, I bought it during the summer, I Jewed him down. Okay? Now, up until that point, the guy wore a Jewish star. He took the Jewish star off and he put it in the bottom of his drawer, in the chest that he had. Well, long story short, eventually it comes out that he's Jewish. And little by little, you see everybody's opinion of him start to change. And in these prep schools, they have an honor code. If you see somebody cheating, you're supposed to turn them in. Well, he sees this very guy who was supposed to be the quarterback, cheating on a test. And he struggles with the idea of turning him in. But he does go to him that night after the test and say, listen, I saw you with the crib sheet. Turn yourself in to the teacher or I will have to go and turn you in. So the next day, all of a sudden, the guy turns everything around and he says, no, it was you. Well, one thing leads to another, and the class has to vote on whether or not who was the one who cheated. Okay? And basically, the majority went with the fact that they said, well, it was the Jewish guy. Because, he's different. He's tried to ingratiate himself when he came here. He never told anybody he was Jewish, this and that. And, the Jewish guy's point was, well, I didn't ask you what religion you were. Does it really make a difference? But obviously it does. Until somebody came forward and said, I saw the other guy cheat. And then, of course, the headmaster wants to forget about everything. He said, let's pretend that this never happened. And Brendan Fraser says, no, you'll never forget it happened, because I won't let you forget that it happened, because every time you see me, you'll remember this. He said, you used me for a successful football season, and I'm going to use you to get into Harvard. And, well, basically at the same time, the headmaster also passed one or two anti-Semitic remarks during the movie. During the high holidays, Brendan Fraser was caught in the chapel praying at night. So the headmaster comes in and sees him, and he says, you people are very resourceful. Now, I don't know if he picked up on this.
She didn't see the movie.
But Q used the phrase, you people. Okay? And I remember being a teacher, and black parents use this all the time. When you talk, you have to be so careful when you talk about these children. And they say, I never did this, but I know people who did. What do you mean by these children? These are our children. Okay? Everything gets blown out of proportion to a certain extent, and everything becomes a racial incident. But it's always, according to certain people, white against black. It never seems to be the other way around. Black against white. Look, in my school, after a while, there were no white students anymore. Okay? But I always got along with everybody. All right? I had parents coming in that were irate, and basically at the end I had them eating out of the palm of my hand because I told them the truth. As far as, you have to kick in some time also. But I think right now I'm straying, okay, and I apologize for that. But Q did use the term you people, okay? Now, what do you mean by you people? The Jews? People in general? I just didn't want to go there with him, okay? So I sort of let it slide.
I think it's just slang, kind of like, there's a girl in my office who refers to everybody as you guys all the time. You guys, you guys. I think it's just language, and I think the problem is exactly what I think Q was trying to get to the point of as well, and that is that when we say things we have to be more careful about what it is that